I am here with Greg from Zero Plants, and when you think of Zero Plants, Greg, at least when I think of them, I think of plants that really are drought tolerant. But let's talk about that real quick. That has a specific meaning to a lot of people, and what is your take on buying drought tolerant plants?
So we do specialize in what we call low water use or climate adapted plants, and one thing we're looking for when choosing the plants that we're going to grow is a plant that thrives in our local environment. And we are a winter rainfall, summer dry climate. So
really not a year-long drought climate at all here in the Northwest.
I mean, you can definitely grow cactus here if you'd like, but we're not really that climate. So plants that can tolerate, well, say 40 inches of rain in 2 months, like we just had, or they can go 3 or 4 months with no water at all, is kind of what we're looking for in evaluating a plant that's really well suited to our climate.
And then a lot of it also, I would think, would be the climate part is the temperature, because we get pretty cold, but then we can get pretty hot in the summer. So all of that has to be taken into consideration.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, you've picked out several stunning plants here, so let's just jump into it, because some I see that I think might be native and some aren't. So native doesn't necessarily mean something that you have to have to have climate. You have other things too.
Yeah, if you're looking to transition part of your garden over to low water and you're starting to pick out plants, one thing to look for is where the plant is native to. So West Coast natives, we have up and down the West Coast more rain in the winter than we do in the summer. So plants that grow here are going to be more adapted to growing in the native soil. They don't need a lot of soil amendment because they're used to our soil types. They're used to our wet weather and they're used to our dry summers. So you don't have to do a lot of supplemental irrigation. You can also look for plants that are native to Mediterranean climates around the world.
Because that's a similar climate to ours?
Exactly. So the emphasis being on the winter wet, summer dry.
Sure. And what about people, though, that say, well, I still want, a lot of blooms. There are a lot of these types of plants that really bloom all the time.
Definitely, yeah. When you go into West Coast natives, there's a lot of plants like Penstemons. We've got a really nice one here.
Beautiful.
They'll bloom throughout the summer, especially if you give them just a touch of water, kind of mimic the summer thunderstorms they would get up in the mountains.
Yeah.
Going with a lot of Mediterranean natives, we've got this perennial is a great example.
It looks like a geranium almost.
Yeah, this is Erodium, closely related to geraniums. This will bloom all summer, so it usually starts in May and goes through October, even without irrigation. It just loves to bloom.
And both of these are really brilliantly blooms. I mean, they're lovely.
Yeah, these are both rock roses. This one's a cistus, and this one's a Hyllimium, or yellow rock rose, native to the Mediterranean region. They'll bloom for about 2 or 3 months. Pretty over-the-top flowers.
And is
for
it
a low water plant.
Greg, I've heard this before, but I'm going to trust you on it. Is it true that if it is a plant that loves summer drought, that often if they're bloomers, a little water will make them even bloom more?
Yeah.
Is that true?
Definitely. Like a lot of these plants, if we have a super dry summer, like this year it looks like we're headed toward pretty dry conditions early in the season, they'll kind of shut down, stop growing, stop blooming. They won't die, but they kind of go into almost a dormant state when it's the dry season. So if you give them just a little bit of water, so like a deep soak every 2 or 3 weeks, which doesn't really take that much, you can really keep them going and blooming all summer.
And then I noticed that you moved this one a little bit, but we're hearing a lot about this plant. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so this is the Showy Milkweed, Asclepius speciosa. This is native up and down the West Coast, and it's one of the species of Asclepius that is a host for the monarch butterfly. So the eggs will be laid near the plants, and the larvae eat the leaves. So it's also really great for other pollinators. It's a good example of a climate-adopted native plant. You can see it a lot out in the east side of the gorge. It is kind of a thug in the garden, though, so it's definitely a good example of the fact that just because it's native doesn't mean it's good for anyone to plant.
Exactly. And a beautiful thug, but a thug.
A beautiful thug, yes.
So I notice over here, this reminds me, this beautiful big plant here looks like a Mahonia.
Yes, and that is Mahonia Gristle, native to China. Really fantastic foliage, closely related to Oregon grape, our state flower, and all members of the genus Mahonia are really superb low water use plants for shade. So they can handle tree root competition and happy and healthy all throughout the year.
And I have to say that there are roses that work in this, because roses really are pretty tolerant of going dry a little bit.
Yeah, a rose is a good example of a more commonly grown garden plant that's super low water. They have really deep taproots that go many feet down in the soil. This is our native Nootka rose, which has really heavily spicily scented pink flowers and then showy orange fruit in the fall.
And you also are a big fan, if you really want to save water, you're a big fan of saying, put a nice container in if you want some annuals, if you want something like that. do that, and that really saves water.
Yeah, definitely. What I prefer to do with a lot of the gardens I've planted is pick my established plants that are out in the garden, the shrubs and the perennials that are not going to need too much water. But if you want a little extra summer flower, get a large size container. It's much easier to control your water use and still get really heavy blooms. Same thing with vegetables. Vegetables in containers do quite well. It's much easier to regulate how much water you're actually putting out on those plants.
And Greg, there's a great pamphlet that you can get from the Regional Water Providers Consortium. What is that?
Yeah, so that's the Water Efficient Plants for the Willamette Valley. That's a really good starter guide. It's got a lot of ideas, different plants you can pick for sun or shade, and by bloom time also. So it's a good starting point for starting to pick some low water use plants.
Well, and you know, one of the best places to visit to find those kind of plants is right here at Zera. You can go to gardentime.tv. We can click you over to the Regional Water Providers Consortium website, or you can also just, we'll click you over to their website. You can come out here and visit this great place. Greg, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks,
William.